Today, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the 2016 to 2019 Africa Twin is one of the best value used adventure bikes you can buy in 2021. If you follow my channel and you watch my videos closely, you may have noticed that I mentioned in one of my videos that last year I took a short break from riding and ended up selling my KTM 790 Adventure R and my KTM 500 EXE. This past spring, I decided, of course, to get fully back into riding and to really restart my YouTube channel and really get things back in gear. So I started to rebuild my motorcycle fleet. Now, the first bike I bought to rebuild my fleet and to really buy what I really wanted this time was a 2021 BMW R1250 GS Adventure. The reason I got the GS Adventure is because it's my ideal long-distance touring bike. It's going to be used 80 to 90% on paved roads and maybe 10 to 20% off-road at most. So with the GS in my garage, just my optimal, perfect all-around street bike and long-distance bike, I needed something to replace my 790. Now, I didn't want to go out and buy another brand new 790 or 890, and frankly, I have some concerns about KTM's reliability, their build quality, and also their customer service. I wanted something that I could use as a 50-50 bike. So what I mean is 50% on highways and 50% off-road. In my off-roading, I tend to ride pretty aggressively, and I wanted something that wasn't too expensive, so I wouldn't be too afraid of dropping it and beating it up and taking it on some tough trails, at least by the standards of an adventure bike. So I wanted to spend around $8,000 to $10,000 US on a used, good quality adventure bike that hopefully already had some setup and some accessories already done to it. But right now, let's jump into the 5 reasons I think the 2016 to 2019 Africa Twin 1000 is one of the best, if not the best, used adventure bike value on the market today. Reason number 1 is price and value. So this bike was used as a commuter bike and really not used off-road, although it has some cool aftermarket stuff, which I'll talk about. But I only paid $8,000 US for this bike. Now, yes, it has 25,000 miles on it, or about 50,000 kilometers, whatever that comes out to. So it does have some miles on it, but being a Honda, the miles don't concern me whatsoever, as they might on some other brands. At $8,000, with already some of the accessories coming with it, it represented a really good value, in my opinion, because to go and buy a new Tenere 700, which is really what I wanted, if I'm being honest, I would have been about $12,000, maybe more than that, out the door for just a base stock bike, and then I would have had to add protection and seats and windshields and luggage racks and all that kind of stuff that you add to an adventure bike, and I probably would have been investing $14,000 or $15,000 to set that bike up. Whereas I could buy this for $8,000. It's less money. I can pay cash for it. It doesn't hurt me as much. I'm not worried about scratching up a new bike. And frankly, there's some things about the Africa Twin that I like better than a Tenere 700, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Hi everyone, my name is Ian and you're watching Big Rock Moto, one of YouTube's fastest growing independent motorcycle channels. If you'd like to see more content like this in the future, there's a few easy things you can do right now. You can hit the thumbs up on the video, you can subscribe and make sure to hit the bell for notifications, you can always leave a comment on my videos, and you can consider becoming a Patreon supporter to gain access to exclusive content from behind the scenes, tips and tricks, and so much more. If you're here looking for my outdoor content, my Jeep content, my travel trailer stuff, that's on my new channel, Big Rock Outdoors, which I'll link here in the card and also down below in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and now back to your video. Now, yes, I know that all used bikes are kind of have inflated prices right now because of, I guess, supply and demand issues and COVID and all these weird things that are affecting the economy. But I still think that these Africa Twins, if you can get them $8,000, $10,000, even $11,000 for some of the nicer ones, that represents a really, really good value compared to what new adventure bikes cost, and also compared to what other used adventure bikes in this category cost. So reason number 2 is that the Africa Twin is a proven platform. It's proven to be dead reliable. People have used this bike for around the world trips. They've thrashed them off-road. They put tons of highway miles on them. People have experienced, and we know what the issues might be. So there are a few issues which I'll mention a little bit later in the video, but generally the engines and transmissions and the chassis and everything on the bike is super solid, just what you expect from Honda. I mean, Honda's a company that, builds generators, power equipment. They're one of the most renowned engineering companies and motorsports companies in the world, and, they deserve that reputation. Their stuff never seems to break, and it's something you just have peace of mind when you buy a Honda. The fact that people have taken these bikes around the world and done a lot of trips with them all the issues have already been exposed, so I know exactly what I'm getting into, and you can't say that about some of the newer platforms out there. So I really like that. It's just something that's proven and you're not going to have to worry about it. So the third reason is off-road ability. So you might recall back to 2016 when this bike came out, and reading the initial reviews and tests back then, all the journalists and writers said that this bike was one of the most capable off-road adventure bikes that had ever come out and that they'd ever ridden. People rank this higher than the KTM 950s and 990s, higher than the F800 GS, and a lot of the other competitors, even who had smaller engines. This bike, being 1000cc, was a little bit larger than some of those, but it performed more like a smaller bike. There's a few things inherent to the Africa Twin that make it really, really suitable for off-roading, and let me run through those now. The first is the stability of the bike. So high-speed dirt roads, gravel, riding through areas of sand. This bike has, I think, a 27.5-degree rake. It's very stable. They didn't go for that sharp rake to make it real twitchy and super fast handling. So some people complain, just like Ryan Fortnine did in his initial review, that on the street it's a little bit sluggish to turn in, and that's true. But what you gain is stability off-road, and that's really, really important to somebody like me. The next thing that makes this bike very capable off-road for something in this size class is it has a lot of suspension travel at around 9 inches, and it has a lot of ground clearance. This bike is really well equipped to go over rough terrain. The suspension can soak up everything, and the ground clearance is enough to get you over most adventure bike situations that you would need to deal with. The next thing is the turning circle of this bike is super tight, so you can spin it around on tight trails, you can make tight U-turns. If you want to go on something crazy like single track, which I don't recommend, you still can do it. It actually turns really, really sharp, so that's a great thing. The other thing is that the bike, Honda did a lot of work to centralize and lower the mass in the bike. So the parallel twin engine is compact, it's down low in the frame. The battery and the toolbox and all of the weight is sort of shoved down as far low and central as they could. And those efforts paid off. The upside of that is that the bike does not feel very top heavy, and the way it handles, it turns direction really quickly, and it handles just like kind of a big dirt bike. I'm not going to say it handles as well as the 790 or the 890, but even if compared to like a Tenere 700, I'm not sure that it's much more sluggish than the 700 is. So I think for a 1000cc bike, it's doing very, very well. The downside of some of that mass centralization is maintenance can be a little harder, and we'll mention that at the end. The fourth reason you should consider the Africa Twin in 2021 is that this bike keeps it simple and it's easy to use. Here's what I mean. So you've got an LCD dashboard that's fairly legible and easy to read. But the biggest thing for me about this bike, comparing it to the new Africa Twin or any of the new adventure bikes, there's no TFT and there's no menu system. So what that means is that for traction control, you have a trigger button on the handlebar behind your high beam switch, which is super easy to use on the fly. No menus, no fussing around, you can just use it right away. And the other thing is, right on the dashboard, there's a big square button that says ABS off. You come to a stop, you hold that down for a second, it turns the rear wheel ABS off, and you're good to go, and you get a nice indicator light on your dashboard. No going through menus and having to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to do it like you have to do on the new Africa Twin that I happen to have for testing right now in the garage. So I'm waiting, I've got this LCD coming up, but the settings reset. So right now my ABS and traction control are back on, but the problem is I have to wait for this. So every time I want to get going again, I don't care about this. Like, I don't want to see a safety message, and then this goes away and there's still lag. So right now, okay, it's still lagging. Maybe now I can do it. So now I have to go back in and I have to do this every single time I restart the bike. Okay, I did configure user 1 mode to be the right kind of screen so that I have access to the settings. So on the fourth tab here, I've got to go ABS cancel on a touch screen. There's no hard button to do this, okay? There's not. So I really appreciate their simple approach to the controls and the electronics. Also, I should mention that since I'm talking about this, the traction control works very well on this bike. I wish it had more than 3 levels, but I usually, for off-roading, I ride on 1 bar, which is the lowest intervention, and it allows you a perfect amount of slip and sliding, but still able to keep the bike in line and in control, coming out of slippery corners and going fast on dirt and gravel roads. It's amazing in level 1, and that's what I use 90% of the time when I'm off-road. Also, the ABS is great. I would never turn off the front ABS, I would never want to, and so it turns off the rear ABS if you want to allow you to slide the back end into corners, and that works really well, and I just love being able to turn it off with that one press of a button. So the fifth reason I think you should consider an Africa Twin if you're looking for a used adventure bike this year is the styling. Now, yes, this is subjective and it's kind of silly, I get it, I understand, but to my eye anyway, I still think this is probably the best looking adventure bike in recent memory. I just can't think of another bike that I've looked at or ridden or that my buddies have that I think is better looking than this. And looks do matter. I think they matter to most people. They matter to me because a motorcycle is partly an emotional experience. You want to connect with it. You want to, turn around and look at it in the garage or when you park it and say, oh, that's a cool looking bike. I like the way that looks. It has the styling that, it really is nice to the eye. And I think the Africa Twins are amazing looking. I really like the styling of this 2016 to 19 bike, but I also like the styling of the newer Africa Twins as well. So with the 5 reasons out of the way, why did I buy this bike over the competitors in the used landscape? So there's a few used bikes that I thought about when I was looking for one of these. A Tenere 700, well, that was impossible. People were asking $11,000 or $12,000 for a used one if you could even find one, so that was kind of much out of the equation. What about a KTM 1090 or 1190? Well, I've ridden those, and those are high-performance bikes. They're kind of similar to this and what they can do. This feels easier to ride. It's a smoother engine. It doesn't have engine heat. It's better quality and reliability. The center of gravity is lower. I think the handling's better on this. So overall, I just prefer the Africa Twin to the 1090 or the 1190. What about a BMW F800 GS? So I've owned an F800 GS, and that was a great bike back in 2009 when it came out, but quite simply, this is 7 years newer technology, better chassis, better suspension, better handling. The motor's way smoother, way less vibration. The traction control you've got on here, which you don't get on the 800 GS. Everything about this is better, and there's not a single thing that I like about the F800 GS that would sway me that way. And in the used market, these seem to be kind of similar prices with the F800, so I definitely would go with this. Okay, what about a Tiger 800 XC? So I've ridden the Tigers as well. I like the Triumphs. I love the 3-cylinder engines. They sound great. Triumphs make a great motorcycle. But for off-roading, the Triumphs, one thing they suffer from is that they have a very steep suspension rake angle. So when you get into soft soil, sand, mud, anything like that, you lose the front end so quickly and it just knifes in. The Africa Twin is a lot more stable. And I just find this to be a better off-road platform. On the street, I'd probably give the slight edge to the Tiger. The engine's a little bit more exciting. You get that 3-cylinder sound. So if you're more of a street rider, maybe consider the Tiger. But if you're that 50-50 rider who really wants to go pretty hard off-road, definitely I think I would probably go with the Africa Twin for the money. So what about a KTM 950 or 990 Adventure? So that's a good question. I've had those too. Those are great bikes, but they're just too old now. The platform is too old. They're difficult to work on. They have engine heat. They have reliability issues. Honestly, this handles better. It feels like it has a lower center of gravity. They have a similar power level. The KTM might feel a little bit punchier. The KTM has a little bit better suspension than this. The stock suspension is soft on this, which I'll talk about in a second. But overall, definitely no regrets. I used to have those 950s, 990s, and I think these were a big improvement. And of course, you get the Honda quality and reliability that you would expect from Honda. So what are the potential downsides that you need to be aware of if you're shopping for a used Africa Twin? So let's just talk about the 16 to 19 1000cc bikes, right? I'm not going to get into DCT versus manual because I have a whole nother video on that coming soon because I have the DCT test bike here in the garage. There's a few weaknesses that you need to be aware of. The suspension is soft. So for off-roading, if you're more of an aggressive off-road rider, you're going to bottom the suspension a lot, and you're going to need to have it resprung and ideally revalved as well, which this bike has, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. But with a revalved and resprung suspension, this bike handles like a gem. The stock suspension very wallowy, and that's something you need to consider. If you're an average off-road rider, if you're less aggressive, more of a touring style rider, I think you'll find the suspension to be very comfortable, and you probably won't have any issues with it. The other thing is that the forks, they have an issue with the front forks, the coating on the inside wearing off and creating stiction or excess friction on the fork. You can remedy that by having the forks hard anodized and changing the oil and changing the bushings and doing a few things. This bike has that dealt with already, but something to keep in mind that the early Africa Twins did suffer from. Another thing you need to know about them is that the right foot peg mount is very fragile. Camel ADV sells a brace, which I've bought for this one, which basically braces that right foot peg mount. So if you fall over in the dirt and you hit that right foot peg, that you don't break the mount off, and then you have to try to finish your ride without having any place to put your right foot. So that's something that you should consider. The other thing to be aware of on the Africa Twins is that the maintenance intervals are pretty long, and you can get a long distance between those maintenance intervals. But when you do have to tear down the bike to do like a valve inspection, spark plugs, things like that, even the air filters. There's quite a bit of stuff that's got to come off because a lot of stuff's buried down here under the gas tank and under these fairings. Quite a bit of stuff has to come off to get to it, but it's not terrible. The air filters people complain about, but I can get these side fairings off in 5 or 10 minutes and change out the air filters, which I just did on this, so it's not too bad. I wish the air filter was under the seat, like on a lot of the bikes nowadays are. That would be much, much better, but it's not that bad. So now's the point in the video where I ask you guys, what do you think? If you were shopping for a used adventure bike in this size range, maybe $800 to like $1,200 or so, and you had about $8,000 or $10,000 US dollars to spend, what would you get? Let me know down in the comments and give me a reason why. I'm really interested to know. Thanks again for watching. Again, please subscribe and hit the bell. Consider being a Patreon supporter. Always leave a comment. Until next time, see you out on the trail. Ride safe. See you.